Okay, so imagine you could point a camera at Earth, maybe about 600 kilometers up. It's a really captivating sight.
Absolutely stunning.
But when that camera focuses in, specifically on the Korean Peninsula at night, the visual you get immediately tells this really profound story.
Yeah, it's incredibly stark.
South Korea is just ablaze with light. I mean, completely lit up. But North Korea, it's almost totally dark. Just this black void. You see maybe this tiny little point of light for Pyongyang, the capital, but that's pretty much it. And that stark contrast, that black void, it already tells you a story, doesn't it? About how 25 million people live in this secretive kingdom.
And that visual is just so potent because it instantly shows you that huge economic gap, the social chasm, really, between the two Koreas. It's such a clear reminder of how things diverged after the war.
Indeed. And so our mission today is really to move beyond just that first glance, and fill in the complex details underneath. As the sun comes up and we zoom in using satellite maps and expert analysis, we can see beyond that simple void.
Right.
We start seeing cities meticulously designed to control people, to unify them, and, constantly celebrate their leaders. We find this just like unbelievable number of military installations.
Yeah, thousands.
Thousands, and many of them burrowed deep into mountains, protecting nuclear weapons, housing, over 1 million soldiers. We see these sprawling factories, really dense housing islands where workers are assigned to live, and just lots and lots of barriers.
Yeah, these barriers, it's important to note, aren't just on the outside borders. They're inside the country, too, really restricting how people move around.
But what really challenges the kind of common story and what these satellite maps really bring to light are the things you just wouldn't expect to see in North Korea. Things like ski resorts, international children's camps, water slides.
Right. Water slides.
Yeah. Bustling markets where people are actually, buying and selling stuff. Schools, fruit processing plants, Christian churches, even apartment blocks where the wealthy elite live. It really does broaden your perspective beyond the usual narratives. Okay, let's unpack this and try to show you a deeper version of North Korea.
Sounds good.
So first off, North Korea is, maybe surprisingly, a country with a lot of natural beauty. It's got these vast mountain ranges, tons of hills, even some rare animal species.
People often think of it as just this desolate gray place, but the landscape itself is really quite striking. It's almost hard to square that kind of pristine environment with the harsh political reality.
Absolutely. And among those mountains is Mount Paektu. It's a volcano revered as a sacred spot for North Koreans. The legends say their former leader, Kim Jong-il, was actually born right there.
A key part of the founding myth.
And interestingly, it sits right on the border with China. Actually, half the mountain is technically in China. The climate there, it can be intensely cold, snowy, and the country's home to somewhere between, say, 20 and 30 million people. Roughly half the population of South Korea.
Right.
And it was, of course, the Korean War back in the 1950s that created these two Koreas. And in that war, what is now North Korea was just virtually obliterated, turned to dust, really.
And that level of destruction meant they had to completely redesign the entire nation, basically from the ground up.
They did. The country was essentially engineered according to this very specific North Korean communist ideology, the nation as a human body.
Ah, yes. The socio-political organism theory.
Exactly. The great leader is the brain. The members of his single party, the government, they act as the nervous system, connecting his will to the masses. And the masses themselves, they're the bones and muscle doing the work, building the country. The whole system is meant to function as one organism, serving the leader's will.
And what's fascinating here isn't just the metaphor, but how deeply that idea, that body configuration, shapes everything. Their national design, their strategy. It allows them to do some pretty unique things, especially when you look at their military.
And yeah, the military, we're talking about just an unprecedented level of national investment here. Most countries, they spend maybe 1% to 4% of their GDP on defense.
Something like that, yeah.
North Korea, it's estimated between 20 and 25%. And when you actually look at the satellite maps, it's so clear this place is designed as a fortress. They have over 10,000 manned military installations, air defense, naval sites, you name it all, crammed into an area roughly the size of Pennsylvania.
Just think about that density. That's like one military site for every 10 square miles across an entire U.S. state. For a country that size, it's extraordinary. It really speaks to this profound sense of vulnerability, maybe paranoia, and definitely their defense strategy.
And a huge chunk of that is right down on the southern border of the DMZ. It's this 4-kilometer thick zone, and technically, you're not supposed to have military assets inside it.
Right, the demilitarized zone.
But that doesn't count the thousands of landmines still there from the war or the new ones North Korea keeps planting. And just beyond that zone, on the North Korean side, they've got something like 900 artillery guns aimed directly at Seoul, the capital of South Korea.
Capable of unleashing.
Yeah.
What was the figure?
Yeah, apparently 10,000 rounds a minute, enough to follow through on their threat to turn South Korea into a sea of fire. Now, of course, other countries, the U.S., South Korea, they have their own powerful military assets nearby. But our focus today is really on North Korea's setup.
And a huge part of that setup, when you don't often see, is their massive underground infrastructure.
You're absolutely right. This country is just riddled with underground bunkers, missile launch sites, nuclear reactors, hidden airstrips, even naval bases built into hillsides or underground.
It all goes back to the Korean War experience.
Exactly. They were just leveled by American air power back then. So a core part of their national thinking is this deep, almost paranoid fear of attack from the air. Their whole defense strategy is built around preparing for that, with this vast network of fortified bases and tunnels.
Some for storage, some offensive.
Yeah, some are for weapons storage. Others seem designed for invasion. They've secretly dug these kilometers-long tunnels right under the DMZ, presumably so they could move troops quickly into South Korea if conflict broke out.
And these tunnels, along with just a massive portion of the whole military machine, serve one very specific overriding goal: protecting the Kim family.
Precisely. A huge part of the military isn't really about national defense in the broad sense. It's about the Kims' personal security. In the capital, Pyongyang, for example, you see barracks housing just a fraction of the estimated, 100,000 bodyguards assigned to them.
100,000. That's an army in itself.
It really is. There's even this whole hill near one of their residences that's essentially a giant bunker. It's got deep underground military installations, likely connected by tunnels. And that's just one part of their, elaborate escape plans. If there's an attack, they could leave via an armored train or apparently helicopters stored right inside that hill.
Wow.
And there are even these persistent rumors of a huge tunnel system up on the northern border, potentially allowing them to secretly escape into China if things went really bad.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the sheer amount of effort, the resources poured into the security of the Kims themselves, compared to, say, helping the average person, I don't think people really grasp the scale of that security infrastructure. It's truly immense.
It's a staggering allocation, yeah. And it's not all underground. The country is just saturated with air defense, something like 1,500 guns and missiles designed to shoot down aircraft. And interestingly, about a third of those are concentrated right around Pyongyang.
Protecting the leadership, the capital.
Exactly. Their Air Force is one of their larger military branches, and the Navy has a pretty significant number of submarines. Experts estimate at least 36 are operable right now.
Submarines are a key strategic asset for them.
Definitely. And then there are the missiles, the rockets, the nuclear weapons. Those are absolutely central to this regime. And Kim Jong-un, the current leader, as the satellite data clearly shows, has really ramped up the testing.
Significantly.
Their longest-range missiles can apparently travel 12,000 kilometers. That strategically puts large parts of the world, including the entire continental U.S., within their potential reach. And many of these are stored and launched from fortified mountain bases.
Right, hardened sites.
But more recently, they've also been focusing on space, sending non-weapons up.
Yeah, they've actually successfully put a satellite into orbit, which is, a pretty big technical achievement. Only about 11 or 12 countries globally have managed that.
And this military, it's absolutely crucial for keeping the Kims in power, which is why they show it off so much. We often see those huge parades, right? Apparently, they even practice them in a life-size replica of Kim Il-sung Square built just for rehearsals.
Wow. So it's propaganda.
Yeah, it's powerful propaganda, it's actual defense. And quite often, the military is also used for just building stuff. I mean, with one of the largest militaries in the world, over 1 million active soldiers, they can just command that workforce for all sorts of massive construction projects.
A readily available labor force.
Exactly. So while the military is this huge tool for defense and propaganda, the regime's control goes way beyond just the army. You actually see signs of it everywhere, like in one of the most common features you spot from satellites, fences, just an incredible number of fences.
And their main purpose isn't really keeping people out.
No, it's more about keeping people in. They've spent years building barriers around the whole country. There's at least 1,400 kilometers of fencing just along the border with China, and a lot of that was built pretty recently, apparently because more and more people have been trying to escape.
A direct response to defection attempts.
Seems like it. And then, inside the country, you also have internal barriers controlling movement. The country's dotted with checkpoints, usually at the borders between provinces, just to make sure people aren't moving around without permission.
So it's this incredibly controlled internal environment. But how effective are those internal controls, really? Do people still manage to get around them? Or is movement pretty much locked down?
That's a great question. The physical barriers are definitely formidable, but kind of paradoxically, the regime's influence stretches way beyond its borders in some really unexpected ways.
Like what?
Well, for instance, there's this fascinating and frankly pretty alarming thing happening with North Korean IT professionals. Apparently, some of them managed to successfully interview for jobs at Western tech companies. They get hired remotely.
Without the company knowing they're actually in North Korea.
Exactly, or linked to the regime. And then they funnel money and sometimes sensitive information back to North Korea, all without their employers having a clue.
Wow. So they're exploiting the digital world to bypass sanctions and generate income.
Precisely. It shows how they use these digital avenues to get around sanctions, make money, while still keeping extreme isolation for most of their own people. It's this weird contrast.
A hidden aspect of their economy.
Okay, so a lot of what we've touched on, the military, the missiles, the, extreme state control, that's often what makes headlines internationally.
Sure, the geopolitical stuff.
Right. But I want to try and get a better sense of what it's actually like to live there, beyond those standard narratives. What's daily life like in the cities or out in the countryside? How do people make things? How do they, have fun or build community?
And it turns out, if you combine different sources, defector accounts, state news, and crucially, these detailed satellite maps, you can actually piece together a pretty comprehensive picture.
Yeah. And the design of the cities themselves, it tells a big part of that story.
The urban planning is very deliberate, very ideological.
It really is. A lot of North Korean cities were basically designed from scratch after the war, when everything was rubble. And because of that, they have this very unique look, this architectural style. It's all meant to fulfill those specific North Korean ideals. Controlling people, unifying them, and constantly celebrating the leaders in the revolution.
You see it in the layout.
Definitely. Many cities are built around a big central square, often with these distinct circle patterns. Then you have these massive, wide boulevards branching off.
Which are usually pretty empty, right?
Yeah, strikingly empty. You see way more buses than private cars. And these huge public spaces are always punctuated by some kind of monument, often showing people in these giant groups arranged in almost perfect geometric shapes.
That deliberate control over public space, how people are seen together,
Yeah.
it's a hallmark of their urban design.
And every major city also has a stadium. Some look like they're in pretty rough shape. Others are actually really impressive, really well maintained. It reflects how much they emphasize sports.
Right, they often punch above their weight in international competitions.
They do, but defectors also say these stadiums are sometimes used for public executions or public shamings. So they're also part of the control system in a really chilling way.
A darker side to those public spaces.
And recently, the government apparently ordered every city to build a traffic park. There are about 170 new ones now. They're meant to teach kids the rules of the road.
Because car ownership is slightly increasing.
Yeah, exactly. While private cars are still rare, there are more than there used to be, especially in residential areas. And that's led to more accidents involving kids who just aren't used to seeing vehicles. So these parks are a response to that.
Interesting adaptation.
You also see buildings that look like churches, sometimes called optics churches. Like there's an Eastern Orthodox one built for Russian diplomats or a Protestant church that was restored. They use these to project an image of religious freedom to the outside world.
But in reality,
for ordinary North Koreans, genuine, independent religious practice is heavily suppressed, often persecuted. It's mostly for show.
right. Let's maybe look at some specific cities to see how this plays out.
Good idea. Let's take Hamhung. It's one of their bigger cities. You see the usual stuff, empty squares, leader statues, but it's also a major economic center for chemicals, making things like fertilizer and pesticides.
And experts think some of that might even be stored underground, given their tendency to build downwards.
Yeah, that wouldn't be surprising. It also has this kind of wild-looking amusement park with water slides, but honestly, you rarely see it looking full of people in the images.
Hmm.
But a really important site there is the Vinylon factory. Vinylon is this synthetic fabric they can make from stuff they have plenty of, like coal and limestone.
Ah, Vinylon. That fits perfectly with their whole ideology of self-reliance, the Jewish idea. It's kind of their national fabric.
Totally. They use it for uniforms, curtains, basically everything. It's so important that the leader himself actually attended its reopening after they renovated it.
Hmm.
You can also see this sort of gnarly-looking yellow pollution haze around the industrial areas. And down at the ports, you see ships loaded up with coal, mostly heading to China, which potentially violates international sanctions.
Right, the sanctions issue is always working.
Okay, then there's Samjeon. This one's up north, near that sacred Mount Paektu. It looks strikingly modern. It's got an ice rink, a ski hill.
This was a massive, rapid construction project, wasn't it?
Huge, and built incredibly fast. The idea was to showcase North Korea as being open for tourism, especially with the Sacred Mountain right there. And the speed is remarkable. There's evidence they used what's called the Youth Construction Brigade.
Or just...
Basically, young people, often teenagers, who are essentially forced to do this really hard manual labor, like 10 to 12 hours a day. It's framed as, patriotic duty, a way to show loyalty and maybe move up later. But for many, it's just state-mandated labor, pulling them out of school, showing the regime's total control over its people.
I remember seeing images of that area just a few years before, and it was practically undeveloped. Then suddenly all this infrastructure pops up. We don't know much about the construction standards, obviously, but the speed itself is undeniable. It really makes you think, what does it mean for a society when it can just command that kind of labor for these huge, fast projects?
It's quite something. Now let's shift over to Chongqing. It's a port city on the East Coast. Lots of heavy industry there, textiles, rubber, steel, train factories, a big power plant. And you see just endless rows of these very uniform, tightly packed houses.
But maybe the most surprising thing you see in Chongqing, I'd argue, is the market, the informal market.
You're right. If you look closely at these areas with the large blue roofs, you find something you really wouldn't expect in North Korea. A market where thousands of vendors are busy buying and selling things all day long, operating right inside what's officially supposed to be this, socialist, communist, anti-capitalist utopia.
And the story behind these markets is fascinating. It goes back to the famine in the 90s, right?
Exactly. After the Soviet Union collapsed, North Korea lost a huge amount of aid it depended on. It led to this absolutely devastating famine. Millions died. And out of that desperation, this resourceful black market just sprang up. For a lot of people, it was literally the only way to survive.
And this rise of the informal sort of underground economy, especially under Kim Jong-un, is such a critical shift. There's a lot of debate among analysts, is this a slow, maybe reluctant move towards market ideas, or is it just the regime tolerating it enough to prevent collapse while still keeping ultimate control?
Well, back in 2008, the government actually tried to crack down hard on this growing informal economy. They saw it as totally against their ideology. But then something pretty amazing happened. The merchants, who in this city were mostly women, they actually protested.
Which is incredibly rare in North Korea.
You just don't see open dissent like that. But they marched to the city government office, confronted the officials, and basically said, look, we can't live if you shut this down. And amazingly today, the government actually allows these markets to continue.
A pragmatic concession, perhaps?
Maybe. These informal markets are now all over the country. A huge portion of the population gets their goods through this black or gray market system. It's become this massive network, often involving trafficking goods smuggled in, usually illegally, from China.
China really is a lifeline for North Korea, isn't it? Not just through official trade, but through this huge informal black market, too. It basically props up daily life for so many people.
So what does this whole informal market system really tell us?
Well, for one, it's kind of a stark admission that the official, centrally planned communist system just doesn't work well enough to feed its people.
Right.
But more than that, it creates this constant tension for the regime. They need this black market to keep things stable, but at the same time, it chips away at the absolute control that defines their society. So they're always doing this balancing act, tolerate it, but then occasionally crack down.
Keep it from getting too powerful or independent.
Exactly. You can see how risky it is for people involved because the regime's power really depends on controlling every little aspect of life. So every now and then they'll disrupt the markets, make sure they're extracting fees, just to keep them in check.
A controlled chaos, almost. Yeah, something like that. Another common thing you see, especially in rural areas, are these housing blocks that are just eerily symmetrical. They pop up a lot, often right next to a farm or maybe a factory, like that fruit processing plant we saw.
And these are for assigned workers.
That's what we're learning, yeah. They're homes specifically for people assigned to work at that farm or factory, often duplexes, little backyards. But basically, you're assigned to live here and work right next door probably your whole life.
Wow. Tied to the job location.
Exactly. You also see these huge complexes of greenhouses. Kim Jong-un has apparently made a big push to expand these rapidly. They've even converted old airports into massive greenhouse complexes, sometimes built with incredible speed, like transforming a site completely between 2022 and today.
Trying to boost food production, presumably.
Presumably. So yeah, one basic way North Korea works is just by assigning people jobs and then having them live and work in the exact same spot. Lifelong assignments.
Very controlled allocation of labor and housing.
Okay, now we've kind of deliberately held off talking too much about the capital, Pyongyang, because it gets so much attention internationally.
Right, it's the face of the nation in many ways.
It is, but to really understand Pyongyang, you first have to understand Songbun. That's North Korea's really elaborate caste system.
Ah, yes, the Songbun system. Crucial.
It rigidly divides the whole population into classes. And once you're in a class, your kids, your grandkids, they inherit it too. So you have the hostile class people, seen as disloyal, maybe linked to Japan back in the day. They get the worst jobs, harshest punishments. Then there's the wavering class in the middle, more opportunities, slightly better health care.
And then the top tier.
And then the core class. These are the elites, the party officials, the highest echelon. And they live in Pyongyang, and they experience a completely different world from everyone else.
It's a city really designed for display, isn't it? A showcase.
It absolutely is. It's a pretty wild-looking place. On Google Earth, you can see these 3D renderings of buildings, like that huge, super wild Ryugyong Hotel.
The pyramid-shaped one.
Yeah. Looks amazing, but it's famously totally empty. It's just this massive piece of propaganda architecture. And because electricity is so unreliable across North Korea, even in Pyongyang sometimes, the lower floor apartments are actually the most desirable ones.
Right. No elevators needed. Practical consideration.
Exactly. You also see these huge, empty theme parks, deserted parking lots, and just this relentless focus on new construction projects. It's all about telling a story, showing the outside world that North Korea can do this, reinforcing their narrative.
The architecture itself is very distinctive, too.
Yeah, it's often described as a throwback to the Soviet era. Lots of brutalist designs, these imposing rows of identical apartment blocks. You even find those optics churches we mentioned earlier here, like the Russian Orthodox one or the restored Protestant church. Again, symbols meant to suggest religious freedom.
Which, to be clear, doesn't really exist for ordinary people.
To be absolutely clear, no. It's not widely tolerated or practiced freely. And those grand boulevards we talked about, in Pyongyang, they're just on another level, so incredibly wide and yet so empty.
10 lanes wide sometimes.
Yeah, up to 10 lanes wide for maybe the 4 cars that happen to be there. It's quite a sight. Kim Jong-un's current main residence is on a hill in this big compound. And, you know, given the regime's love for going underground, you have to assume there are probably underground entrances, tunnels, bunkers behind the main house.
Standard operating procedure for them, it seems.
Oh, and just a quick note, if you happen to be looking on Google Maps and see a label near Kim Jong-un's place marked concentration center, experts say that's almost certainly just the barracks where his bodyguards live.
Right, a mapping error or misinterpretation. Important not to jump to conclusions based solely on map labels.
Definitely. You can't believe everything you see on Google Maps. So Pyongyang, while it might look fairly developed and nice in places, it's fundamentally where the elite live. And they're directly benefiting from the output, the resources generated by all the, frankly, horrific abuse and forced labor happening out in the countryside.
A stark internal contrast.
Oh, and they also have this incredibly deep underground train system. Visually, quite impressive, actually.
Deep enough to double as a shelter, perhaps.
Very likely.
Yeah.
But then we have to talk about the most egregious part of North Korea's human rights abuses. The political prison camps.
The Kwanliso.
Yeah, this is the darkest aspect.
This is where some of the absolute worst stuff we can imagine is happening. People get sent there for, well, kind of anything. Perceived rebellion, disrespect, even just wrong thinking. Or maybe you're a public official who messed something up.
And it's not just the individual who's punished.
No. That's one of the most brutal parts. It's a multi-generational system. If you're sent there, your children, even your grandchildren who aren't even born yet, can be condemned to live and die in the camp too.
And officially, North Korea completely denies these camps even exist.
Ridiculously, yes.
Yep.
But satellite imagery clearly reveals around 700 penal facilities across the country. Now, these range from smaller, short-term sites to these absolutely massive camps holding maybe 50,000 people, concentration camp-style sites.
Often hidden away in remote areas. Usually, yeah. On huge tracts of land, deep in the mountains, surrounded by guard posts, extensive fencing. And inside these camps, there's a lot of economic productive activity, as they call it. But it's all driven by forced, incredibly hard labor.
What kind of work?
Things like coal mining, farming, raising livestock, running distilleries, factory work. And disturbingly, there are just so many children in these camps. Many of them were actually born inside the camp walls. And they're forced to work from the time they're maybe 4 to 6 years old for 10 or 12 hours a day.
It's almost impossible to comprehend that level of cruelty.
The conditions are described as just horrific. People constantly on the verge of starving, forced to fight over scraps of food, meager resources.
And, even within these camps, looking at the satellite images, it's chilling how they sometimes resemble a twisted microcosm of a North Korean city. You might see a central square, a monument, murals of the leaders, indoctrination centers, even schools, though those are likely for the guards' children.
A distorted reflection.
But the grim reality is, most people who go into these kwanliso, these political prison camps, they never leave. They are effectively life sentences, often ending in death from starvation, disease, overwork, or execution.
It's a system that has its roots, historically, in the old Soviet Gulag system. And the UN has flatly called it a human rights abuse with no parallel in modern times. They describe a level of control and deprivation that just doesn't exist anywhere else in the world today. Not even close. It really encapsulates the situation for those 20-odd million people inside North Korea, essentially prisoners within a larger system they can't change.
Yeah, it's, like you said earlier, a prison within a prison.
Exactly. A condensed, even more brutal version. Now, just to really hammer home that horrific reality, let's contrast it directly with Kim Jong-un's own lifestyle. Let's look at Wonsan, for example.
His coastal retreat.
Yeah. This is where he has a family compound right on the coast. Private beach, extensive security barriers, massive buildings, huge yard, even a shooting range. And naturally, right next to it, a private railroad station.
For those escape plans.
Always got an escape plan ready, it seems, just in case he needs to make a quick exit during an invasion or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's even an international children's camp located quite near his compound there.
The juxtaposition is jarring.
It really is. To see the evidence of the prison camps, the unimaginable suffering, and then to see this opulent display of personal luxury, it's frankly sickening. It's deeply disturbing.
A stark illustration of the regime's priorities.
But despite all the horrors, despite the absolute control we've been talking about, it's still so important to remember the people themselves.
Absolutely.
North Koreans are just ordinary people like you and me. They have dreams, they have ambitions. Fundamentally, they just want to have enough food, maybe enjoy themselves a little bit. And despite everything, you still see these wholesome, meaningful traditions and rituals surviving.
Like holiday celebrations.
Yeah, celebrations like the Lunar New Year or the Harvest Festival, they bring people together. Now, extreme poverty means the feasts aren't lavish, maybe just some homemade alcohol, simple rice cakes. But what it fosters is something that poverty and even totalitarianism can't completely stamp out.
Yeah.
Community, the nourishment you get from relationships.
And maybe, ironically, the fact that their movement is so restricted can sometimes lead to a deeper sense of intimacy and connection within their local communities.
Yeah.
They really have to lean on each other. They survive because of each other in many ways.
One defector actually put it so powerfully. They said, everything was suffocating and pitiful in North Korea, but it is a country that I have many positive memories from. So if someone asks me, what is North Korea like? I say, North Korea is a nice place with plenty of love.
Wow.
Oh,
that captures the complexity, doesn't it? And that's, I think, one of the things that often gets lost when we look at North Korea through the lens of traditional media.
Yeah.
Because, people just living their lives, having happy moments, forming real bonds.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really considered newsworthy. But a military parade, a nuclear test, a missile launch, that's newsworthy. So those images tend to dominate the narrative we see.
So as we kind of wrap up this deep dive, we really hope we've left you with a more nuanced picture, that there's actually more to this country than just The horrible realities that are so often and rightly highlighted. This exploration, using satellite imagery, expert analysis, it hopefully offers a more multifaceted, deeper understanding of North Korea. It reveals this incredibly controlled, yet also surprisingly complex social and economic reality, and maybe most profoundly, the incredible resilience of its people.
Yeah, that resilience is key.
So maybe the final thought to leave you with is this. Even amidst those tightly controlled